Well, happy Boxing Day. Well, every week Jumpy's Choice is my little present. Yes, we are doing it. My little present to the Armidale community. Another one about attendance. Me not too much, but other regulars and semi-officials sometimes get very upset because so few people come. And somebody who is more or less a regular than not here today told me that another regular who is also not here today had said, look, but this just depends how you look at it. When you teach any university sort of unit, this unit can have up to, I don't know, 100 people or 200 who are nominally, in fact, internal students. You might be quite lucky if you got 12 or 15 people to your class every week, which is in fact what we sort of have here, 12, 20, 15, 30 sometimes. So from that point of view, if I were an academic, I'd be doing quite well. So where's the problem? So Boxing Day, as always, here is another little present for you. And it's a bit of a special Boxing Day present, but then the second half of the present is hopefully taking us further into time. So we'll play the Boxing Day piece first. I have a feeling that almost pretty much everybody may recognize these notes, maybe not. But you will hear them in a different way, of course, today. As always, the Armidale piano duo here, my friend Lena Schmaltz, with whom I've played piano duet for so many hours these last 18, 19, what? I dare say almost, how much? 12 plus 10? It must be 22 months, almost, right? It must be something like 21, 22 months close. So, for which I'm incredibly grateful. And that has led to a number of Jean-Pierre's choices, in fact, but in a big perspective has led to looking up all kinds of composers of piano duet music, all kinds, as we did last week, for example. This guy, what's his name again? These waltzes, right? Fuchs, yes, from Vienna. And also very many arrangements for piano duet from the 19th century. Very recently, it also has led to me trying to arrange for piano duet, which is, I hope, somewhat promising, but still in statum nascendi somewhat. It's like we're still sort of working on it. So it's too early to do that today. But maybe next Christmas we'll play that for you. But this is an existing, as the word goes, existing arrangement of a very famous piece of music. And the arranger is very famous as well. We'll talk about it, but play it first. Yes.
Thank
The audience is multiplying every 10 seconds or something. Thank you all for coming. Does anybody recognize this piece of music? Yeah. Does anybody not recognize it? Because I think there are people who don't know it. Yes. Yes?
I didn't recognize.
You don't know it?
No.
Oh, good. And you don't know it? No, good. And you know it because it has been played in your house 3 million times in the last 5 weeks. But otherwise, you might not know it, right? And you know it, of course, and you maybe know it, yes. You don't know it either. Ah, good. Oh, fantastic. Well, I think those people who know it think, how is it possible that somebody does not know this, right? Well, join the club. When I taught at the university a while ago, somewhere, almost any piece of music that I played, is that right? Any recording I played, I thought, well, this is so obvious. This piece is, everybody knows this. Or no, maybe not that, but then everybody knows it. And almost randomly, anything I could take out of my record collection, and they would not know it. Am I right? Is it fair to say? Yes. So join the club. Now, it's sometimes you're surprised about these things. On the other hand, I thought this was great when I was teaching it at university, because that's how few people knew things. Because it was, like, in a way, very easy. Almost anything I would brought, we could talk about for a long time. It's very easy. And lots of fun also. And the students who want to learn something, anything really that I would tell them that they had something to learn was really very nice. I'm not talking about recent experience, by the way. I'm talking about something very long ago. So here we are. Yeah. Well, for those of you who don't know, anybody want to take a shot at the composer or what kind of music this is? It's obviously not. That's one thing that's certain. It's obviously not written for piano duet, right? Can you tell?
No.
Or maybe it sounds so good you think, well, this sounds like a nice sort of piece for piano duet. Well, great, that's also good. If it was for piano duet, you think it's a piece by Handel?
No, the original piece is by Handel.
Is by Handel, yes.
Well, perhaps Mozart.
It could be Mozart transcribing Handel for piano duet. Yeah, because Mozart transcribed Handel for, well, a big orchestra. Yeah. With what piece did he do that? With what piece did he do that?
The Messiah.
Yeah, Messiah.
The whole of the Messiah.
Yeah. So long story short, this is from Handel's Messiah. And Mozart was one of the early arrangers who worked on Handel's Messiah. I'm not sure if he was necessarily the earliest. In fact, I would be very surprised, because I'm sure soon after Messiah was first performed, all kinds of editions came out that made it possible for people to sing and play this music at home. Right? So there were very early sort of arrangements of this music around in England. Mozart, something like, gosh, how long would it have been? I bet something like 40 years after Messiah was first composed by Handel. There was this guy in Vienna who was really into old music. Like some people today are into what's now called early music. But the thing is, this now is, there can be anything. I mean, people who are into early music can be listening to Mahler, as long as it's performed in a bit of a funny way, right? Or Brahms, or Bach, and as long as the trills suck with the upper note and the strings don't play for Brahms, it's all early music. But even if they not do that and do something, it can still be early music. It's quite vague now what in fact early music means. But the early musicians all know, because they all do the same sort of funny things that I've learned, like a sort of code almost, an in sort of thing. I myself was very, very, very much into early music when I was I was never really little, but smaller, younger, and and I was very, very much trained in early music land. Holland is the early music capital of the world, arguably. Well, has been for a long time, and I think therefore that I have a right to make jokes about it because it's so much my own background. I was trained to play the harpsichord myself, and very much early organ music and so forth. So early music. But this guy in Vienna in say 1780 or so was into old music, and I mean some people today. I was reminded of this a few weeks ago. Bellingen, a French student, was playing some sort of medieval music. And they say, yeah, some people are into medieval music, and some people just think very special, old, sort of funny medieval music, and it's different culture, sort of. Now, so this guy in Vienna, 1780, was into old music. Now, what did that mean?
Yeah.
If in Vienna in 1780, if you were into old music, what sort of music did you really like? Well, the answer is Bach and Handel. It's a bit like today, not in classical music, but I suppose in pop music. So, well, what sort of music do you like? Well, I like 80s, I like 90s. Rock, well, what kind of rock? Well, classic rock. And then you go back and it turns out to be something like 70s or so, right? And I suppose when you get older, and you used to like pop music, but maybe not so much anymore, you say, well, I used to like pop music very much. Well, what sort of pop music? Well, 60s. Oh, that's really old, right? I can think of some of my former students who would say, well, that's really old pop music, Professor in America. Professor in America. That's really old music also. I mean, I was born around that time, I have a right to listen to that music. So, funny enough, in pop, that sort of amount of time is enough to make music really, really dinosauric sort of character. In classical music, we have lost this. Most people who listen to classical music listen to music that is at least 100 years old. In fact, even that is sort of pushing it for most people. When you think about it, most people here, I think, sort of like classical music in one way or another. How much music, classical, do you listen to that is 100 years old, even, or less? Not very much at all. In fact, if you're a regular here, we don't stay away from that sort of music. We have played Ravel here, and recently some organ music from the 20th century. So I do in fact include the 20th century very much, but I think that is something that most of us don't in the first place listen to, right? So in 1780, 40 years old was old enough for a music lover in Vienna to employ, a decent orchestrator, arranger, namely W.A. Mozart, to update this music a little bit. Old-fashioned. We like it, but we have to sort of move it a little bit, Today, some of my former students would say, well, you have to put a drum beat behind it. A while ago, this is a little bit what Mozart did with Haydn, but with Handel. I was reminded of this too a while ago, and I was interviewed for a local newspaper about one of the festivals we had this year here, and the journalist said, "So when you play this music, do you do your own thing with it, or do you play the original?" And I just, for one moment, I just saw the whole world disappear. Like the world was meant to disappear the other day, and I thought, in fact, that was happening the moment that I spoke with that journalist. But then I said, well, I suppose my way of looking at classical music is that I try, and I say this more and more, that I try to look at this composition in its own context and take it from there. So I suppose I do the original thing. Inevitably, I look at it with my perspective, but I try to do that as truthfully, as honestly as I can, which may not be very honest and truthful, but I try. Now, at the same time I'm saying this, I realize that this is also a lie, because what we're doing here today of course, is not at all looking at the piece in its own context, although at the same time it is. Now, so this is not an arrangement by Mozart. Mozart had a huge orchestra. In fact, Mozart was in a nice situation that he could add instruments to Handel's score, and maybe more singers and so forth. We think of Messiah as this piece for the more singers the better, right? If you had 500 singers, deal. Orchestra not so important, but big orchestra would be nice too. I forget the numbers, but Messiah was premiered with a very small choir by today's standards, and a small. Do you know? Happen to know? It was not. I don't think 30 singers, and maybe 24, 26 or something.
But I thought Handel himself. I mean, the music can be written with, can be played with a very small chamber orchestra,
Or with or large orchestra.
almost sort of a string quartet and
Almost. Yeah.
I think
But
Handel himself liked the idea that if he could get a lot of musicians, he would use
I
them.
would not have been surprised if he did. Exactly right. And so the tradition of doing mass performances of that music is very early. And for example, not Mozart, but Haydn witnessed such performances with hundreds of singers in Westminster Abbey in London in the early second half of the 18th century, and totally loved it. Yeah. So there was these two possibilities at the time. There were two possibilities: small chamber music like or mass production. Both possible. But this is all not that, of course. It's not Mozart. It's not Haydn looking at Handel. It's somebody else looking at Handel. And of course, not in the first place at all for a performance, I don't think. I think this arrangement here is in the first place maybe to get to know this music at home, or else you know it already. We heard it the other day or last year at the performance, and now we're going to play it ourselves at home. It's like so many piano duet transcriptions. Well, the piano duet transcription thing is in essence a 19th century genre. It starts very early in the 19th century. It exists a little bit maybe before, but in essence 19th century. And this particular one was done by, I didn't think of this man as a famous 19th century arranger. But this man is emblematic for piano playing, especially for piano technique in the 19th century. Only one guess.
Well, all I can say is that one very great composer I know, when asked who was the greatest composer, said Handel.
It's not Beethoven.
Right.
No, arranging Handel. No, no. What's that? Czerny. Yes, very good. This arrangement was done by Karl Czerny and published as one of 6 great choruses by Handel transcribed for piano. And 3 of them only are from Messiah, unfortunately. There's 3 from 3 different other oratorios. And how did we get to this one now? Well, all these things just come up, it seems. But this is very obvious. Lena said a while ago, well, I'd like to, can we not play Bach's Christmas oratorio for piano duet? I said, look, I don't think it exists. Maybe somebody has done it, but let's take a look. Now we quick search online, nothing. I said, but maybe there's something like Messiah. So I look, IMSLP, and there it is. Messiah for Antoine, arranged by Karl Czerny. And somebody must own the original print and play it from it, because his fingerings, modern fingerings penciled in, and then put the thing online. I'm very grateful to whoever did it, because we right away were able to play it. And because I thought it was such a nice sort of experience, and because the original edition, the original print from around 1840, I think, is so incredibly hard to read. I did something which I have not done before, I think. I took this 19th century edition and typed all the notes up in a music notation program, and we're hoping that this will be the beginning of a little series of piano duet arrangements, maybe, called the Armadale Piano Duo series, which we hope to be able to make available for free online, because I increasingly don't believe in selling music editions via publishers and so forth. It's like, it's a bit of a dinosaur. So we're working on this. The problem is it's more work than you think, particularly because people make mistakes all the time. At least I make mistakes all the time when typing up this stuff. And so you go through various stages of correcting and proofreading and lost this and so on. But that's very nice. And that made it a bit easier for us to play it. And because it's such an exceptionally popular piece, we're hoping that maybe this edition thing makes it easier for people to read it than the original edition. The original edition has, of course, advantages. It's what Czerny gave to the publisher, what the publisher did with it. On the other hand, it seems not to be free of mistakes. So we caught a few mistakes, we are pretty certain, in the original edition. And that also, I think, is a good reason to put out a modern edition of it. As a side issue, you know how piano duet music is typically published? Yes, yeah. It's a very interesting dinosaur of music editing. It's usually what you call it, oblong format, right? Like
landscape format.
Landscape format. Thank you very much. Landscape format, and one pianist only looks on the left page, and the other one only on the right pages, right? So the top two hands are on the right page, and the bottom two hands, the other player, are on the left. This has obvious visual advantages and obvious also disadvantages, because the right-hand player does not really know what the left-hand player is playing at the same time. All right. Now, sort of professionals or semi-professionals develop this sort of skill of sort of peeking over and seeing what he's doing, and sort of. But then this is risky because you lose your place in the music. Okay. So in editing this now, in what I hope will be the Armadale Piano Duo series, we decided to make it a bit easier and to put it in score format, so you can right away see what's happening. The advantage of this is also that I'm very interested in a sort of scholarly way in this whole arrangement business in the 19th century. And really, you can only study arrangements if you see them in score. That's the thing. We have been playing on and off a wonderful, wonderful, I think, arrangement of a different piece from the 19th century, earlier, but 19th century arrangement. And it's quite massive. And increasingly, I think I wanted to put that whole darn piano arrangement into score, because I really want to study it and want to be able to write something about it, maybe. But it's a lot of work. But basically, if you want to be serious about it, this is what you have to do. Of course, there's a lot of talking. Want to hear this one more time? For those of you who don't know it, well, now that you know, it's Handel, and from a Handel oratorio. So what, at a guess, what are you supposed to hear in the piano reduction that you would have in actual reality if the piece was performed in the original version?
The vocal line.
Yeah, vocal lines, yes, singers, as well as orchestra. Yeah, orchestra for Handel is, in the Messiah, is fairly small, is in essence...
Well, it's very straightforward.
Strings, in essence.
Strings and
a couple of oboes, if you can find them, and a few trumpeters and so forth, maybe Tim. In fact, there's no trumpets even in this movement. So it's really only strings, and an oboe too can play along with the sopranos in the choir, but that's not even crucial. So really, singers and strings. And Czerny simply took the score, I'm sure, and organized all Handel's notes and put them on, well, 2 steps there and 2 steps there. But you see, Czerny, I bet you, must have had a score. I have no idea if any such working score from the 19th century arrangers still exists, but it must have existed because no arranger could write the right-hand part there and the left-hand part there. You just don't work that way. That's something that the engraver does, you see, who prints the music. So there you have it. I think it's a marvelous piece of music. Now, for those of you who do know it, another question. How is our performance quite possibly significantly different from a standard performance today?
We have two parts. No? I mean,
Standard duet performance, you mean?
No, from a standard performance of the piece today.
perhaps you better play it again and then we can ask.
Some of you may have been involved in performances,
Yeah.
maybe not standard, but relatively standard performances of this piece today. If you imagine yourself singing or playing in such a performance, what is the most obvious thing that is different in our performance, maybe?
There's no words.
Well, there's no words, sure. No.
It's hard on a piano.
Yeah.
Perhaps some of the notes are more detached than the modern performance would be.
No, and on the others maybe more legato, but yeah. I personally don't. I think there's a more obvious difference. You know? No idea? Oh, you should do.
Yeah.
Oh, we'll play one. huge differences.
Throughout the year, you've made a point of saying that the bass is often the boss.
Oh yes.
And this time it's not.
Well, I try to be the boss, but I mean, you never know. No, it's funny. That's so interesting. You should say. Can I ask why?
Why? Because I could hear it.
Ah, okay, all right, yeah. Well, I mean, the bass. I would say that with Handel, technically, the bass is very, very much the boss. But of course, the melody is incredibly wonderful and outspoken, and that, of course, is mostly not in the bass. Yeah, good.
The clarity of the four voices
Yeah.
being, they're equal. It's a conversation between all of the four voices.
Of course.
But, and I guess the other thing is there does seem to me, again, going back to a more classical idea than a modern one, there seems to be very sparing, if any, use of the pedal.
Interesting. You're saying that the four voices come out more clearly, more
Yes.
evenly than in a typical
There's great
chorus
clarity,
Yeah,
great
well,
clarity of
I would
all
say-
the four voices and their conversation.
Okay, well, that's a compliment. Either towards Ant or Czerny, I don't know. I would have thought that, in a way, a good choral or even a not so good choral performance, it should almost be easier to bring out those four voices.
Yes.
You know, we only are two people.
Yes.
Are two people with only two hands. And in a way, if you have like a group of 20 sopranos and a group of 20, that should be easier to bring out that clarity.
Yes.
But there is something about the piano that in a way sort of makes that easier, I think, yes. And the other thing, the pedal thing is a wonderful, interesting observation. And you must be a pianist, otherwise you wouldn't say this. So thank you very much.
Piano, I wouldn't say a piano.
In fact, I use piano duets. The rule is that the bottom player plays pedal. This was apparently not always the case. From 19th century editions, I learned that that is not standard. But in a way, it's today's standard, and it usually is best. So I actually today use more pedal than we normally do. And that's, don't ask me why. It's a bit of an intuitive thing. At home, we think we can use much less pedal, and here we use a bit more church, piano, whatever. I am actually, by now, quite convinced that piano duet playing, until well into the second half of the 19th century, normally was conceived of as virtually pedal-less. If not basically pedal-less. And that changes 1860, 1870, 1880. You start to see indications for pedal in scores. But they're still so rare that you can sort of say, well, there's obviously nothing going on except their pedal, and their pedal, and their pedal. So walking back to this 1840 or so, my bet is that Czerny is thinking of this as no pedal at all. The problem with doing that today is, number one, we're not used to it, and number two, we don't exactly have Czerny's pianos. I wish I did, because I think they're vastly superior. Today's piano is, not only the audience is geared toward expecting pedal, but the pianos are too. The piano is made for constant pedal use, right? And so we have to compromise a bit. But if I use less pedal than maybe most pianists would, that's because I'm very well aware of exactly this. Thank you. Yes.
On the piano, you said Czerny when he was done. His
Czerny.
piano had no pedals.
No, he had pedals, but it was much more of a special effect thing. And I think piano duet, because of the nature of the genre, you have 20 fingers instead of 10, you need it much less. You can do much more fingers. Yes, what did you want to say?
I know this sounds very almost ridiculous,
And I've been in performances of this. To me, it seems that the piano version is longer.
Interesting. Probably is actually.
Just Chaney
Why
likes
would
using
that
those
be?
intervals of a third. You know, da, 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 da,
Oh, you
on
mean
and on
you think
and on.
there's actually more notes? Like
I
more
mean,
bars?
No, well, yes, I think it takes long. It's longer. It's a longer piece, I think. But
Is it?
I don't think I don't
It's
know.
not. No, that's exactly the same length.
Oh,
Yeah.
Right. Let's get
In
bars.
bars. In bars. But I do actually think, and my bet is that our performance of this piece is in fact longer than a standard performance of this piece today. If nobody notices it, then I think that is a point for us, or for my idea about this. I have no doubt that we performed this significantly slower than an average performance today would.
So it is long.
I'm not exactly aware of the metronome mark that we use because we don't work that way, but somewhat related, but not really related to this. A few weeks ago, I decided to sit down and do what I wanted to do for a long time, but I didn't finish it, of course. I took 4 19th century editions of Messiah, second half 19th century, 3 of which I own copies of, the third I found online. And nice, all these editions have metronome marks. Of course, that means that the editor indicates the exact speed for the beat, like mathematically exact, allegedly. That, of course, doesn't tell you what Handel wanted. It tells you what the editors in the late 19th century suggest, how they hear his music. And it is by and large substantially slower, of course, than what we hear today. And that fitted with playing this piece on the piano. Chaney's arrangement, it's not, I'm not saying you cannot play it at the tempo that people play this music today, but it doesn't invite that. There are technical things in the piano arrangement that invite a much slower tempo. And that rhymed very nicely with what I had learned about performance practice, tempo-wise, in the 19th century from these editions. So I'm favoring this sort of tempo, and if you want to know what do I think that Handel did,
Yeah.
well, I answer it this way. Most people today would try to somehow sell you this theory, which is that we today play, of course, exactly the way Handel did. Right? Like we have, because the early music movement has improved so much in the last 20, 30, 40 years. Finally, and we have sped up things a little bit because it was all too slow, and vibrato, trills, up and out, la-di-da, all very easy. And it's now pretty much the way Handel played, of course.
So this one
And yes, would be much faster. And that means, if that is true, then you have to accept Handel played very fast. Okay, let's accept that for now. And we play very fast, right? In the 19th century, people played very slow. And it was a bit faster, and then in the second half, 20th century, it became a lot faster, and now we're back to Handel again, right? So now you have to explain how from Handel into the 19th century, the tempo goes down like this. That I find impossible to explain for myself. I yet have to hear an acceptable explanation for that. I just don't see how Handel can play very, very, very fast in 1740. Maybe via Mozart and Beethoven and Czerny, we land at a very slow tempo in the mid-19th century, and then it takes us as long to get back to Handel. I don't see this mechanism. What I personally think is much more likely is that Handel played at a nice, pleasant, sort of easygoing tempo, and that tempo was, my bet, quite stable for a long time. There was no reason to push that tempo, because performances were a little bit rare, there was not this competition sort of thing all the time, this performances. So this tempo remained sort of stable. In the 19th century, it goes up a little bit, gradually, and in the 20th century, when we get especially into the gramophone era, 1950s, you get lots of recordings, and one goes faster than the other, and then it becomes exponential. That is my own take on the tempo development. And that is one thing that, looking at these old arrangements, and also looking at these old tempo indications, tempo marks, metronome marks, has taught me a little bit. I don't particularly like this for antiquarian reasons per se. What I most like it for is that I think the music sounds better that way. and a different avenue is that in teaching music, I have so often seen that if you can just take the tempo a little bit easier, notes fall into place, and everything becomes more enjoyable. Much, much more so than students dare to think, even. And so I think, and also teaching maybe at the beginner level also, or intermediate level, I know that music is much more playable than people now often think it is, because recent recordings have made pieces completely impossible for intermediate players. But these pieces may, in fact, have been written for intermediate players in the first place. Right? So we go a bit far away from this topic. To finish, and getting over time. I know it's Boxing Day, but gosh. Shall we play our other piece, or do you have time? Yeah. We have one other piece that takes us out of the season. Of course, this is For Unto Us a Child is Born from Messiah that we just had. So very, very much Boxing Day Christmas piece. Chrissy. Here is a different, completely different piece of music. Different composer, different arranger, yet also these two pieces have things in common. One thing they have in common is the key. And it's both old music arranged in the 19th century. It's also both oratorio. Handel, of course, Messiah, oratorio. This piece also is oratorio. And we'll start with a brief chorus, and then we'll play an aria from this famous oratorio. And it will be very short, and we'll talk about that more sometime later. Before we finish, before I forget, the last choice for quite a while will be next Wednesday, that is January 2nd, I believe. That's a special New Year's choice. I don't know what happens yet, but it will be a special New Year's choice. I will then be on study leave for 4 months, and the next choice after January 2nd will be on May 8th. Please mark this in your calendars. I don't want to be here on my own on May 8th, because it would be really sad. So here is another chorus from an old composer, transcribed for piano duet, and then an aria. very, very quick. Any guesses?
Bach?
Bach, yes, of course. Yeah. More precisely, any guesses? The German contingent knows this. As long as they're not Catholic, yeah. You don't know it either, right? No. This is the very brief chorus and an aria are from somewhere nicely into the second half of the St. Matthew Passion. In other words, this interesting Boxing Day, we had, well, Christmas and Good Friday on one day. And the St. Matthew Passion in this marvelous piano duet arrangement by Solomon Yada's son, a Jewish late 19th century Leipzig organist and conductor and theorist and composer who did this arrangement. Oh yeah, we have been playing around with this arrangement for a long time now, and we stopped dying to play it maybe around Good Friday, but it will not happen this year because I won't be in Armidale. But we'll revisit this, I'm sure, and other movements of the piece in this. We think it's a fantastic arrangement, maybe mount performances of some arias in the original version with strings and so forth. Very quick question again. The right hand of the piano, right? Which instrument do you think this is in Bach's version?
Violin?
It's a violin, solo violin. Yeah, it's one of the two wonderful, wonderful solo violin arias in the Matthew Passion. And personally, this is my favorite. It's been for many, many, many years. So it's been a lot of fun to play that on the piano with Lena and to play the violin solo with my right hand. We'll do more of that at some point in time. These were my two choices for this Boxing Day here in Armidale, New South Wales, Australia. Thank you all for coming. And again, next week, special New Year's choice, and then I'll be away, out of sight for a while. Thank you for coming.